Turning now to Chief Justice Cockburn's 1870 description of what testamentary capacity is and isn't, and some empirical presenting traits of narcissistic personality disorder, and my father's actions and choices. Clause 1. It is essential to the exercise of such a power that a testator shall understand the nature of the act and its effects. In the Trump-Clinton video, Vaknin states, all narcissists have grandiose fantasies. Coupled with a lack of empathy, it makes them cognitively deficient. This, he says, makes it very difficult for them to perceive reality properly. They fail the reality test. This is where I think the concept of mind blindness can be applied to narcissists who seem potentially profoundly blind and deaf to any reality not their own, who seem to lack what is called a theory of mind for other people around them. As a former rhetoric instructor, I believe the most important rhetorical and cognitive strategy that I used to teach was cause and effect, which I consider essential to effective and critical thinking and understanding. What I understand of mind blindness is it might include a serious handicap in regards to effects. More on this in a moment. For the present, I do not believe it a stretch to see a logical relationship between Vaknin's reality tests and Cockburn's effects, especially when elsewhere in the same video, Vaknin observes narcissists as destructive, abusive, sometimes sadistic. My story will give specifics to these points. I believe there is evidence of my father's cognitive deficiencies in how his trust was drafted and in some of his correspondence with the trust and with me and others. He had a bachelor's degree of science and was 74 years old when he sought an attorney's assistance drafting his will and trust. But as for the way the trust would operate, cash assets, principal, investing, discretionary payouts, he did not seem to understand those aspects as well as my mother would have with her high school diploma. A key clause in the trust and a focal point of so many of my headaches dealing with people associated with the trust is a clause that reads, no further payments out of principal to me besides the monthly stipend. 3 effects of this clause alone indicate to me his lack of understanding. First, cash assets ran out pretty quickly. Thus, my stipend stopped while trust attorneys sought a court construction, allowing payment out of principal as needed. I still wonder who missed this glaring issue, my father or his estate attorney. Indeed, I can easily believe a scenario wherein his attorney possibly said, Mr. N., your cash assets will run out a few months after the stipend begins. With the no further payments out of principal clause, your stated goal of a stipend for the remainder of your son's life is defeated and monthly payments will cease. Is this what you intend? Most people would take the hint that things didn't add up. Not my father. He would put on a show of looking like he was considering the issue, looking into the distance for a moment and then nodding yes. The attorney was probably mystified for a moment, but moved on when there seemed no point in pursuing the issue. Still, there are other consequences, other effects of my father's NPD-caused cognitive deficiencies, which prevented him from understanding a la Cockburn's first clause. Second, despite knowing of my financially very unrewarding career in higher ed, with no prospect of a retirement or health insurance, despite knowing of my having very serious asthma and how that makes getting insurance and building savings unlikely, and despite knowing my net worth as I neared 50 was 0, My father did not include in his trust any language for discretionary help with my future heart attack, stroke, or other inevitable medical crisis. Two lady lawyers working for the trust also could not see that repeatedly turning down my well-reasoned and well-explained entreaties for such an amendment would mean I might someday have to pass on life-preserving emergency care due to concern about lack of financial means, while at the same time, trust principle was enough that a small discretionary payout to help with treatment for a heart attack or stroke might save my life. I don't expect the trust to pay for all medical events before that, though a night in the hospital for life-threatening asthma usually takes a large part of my monthly stipend after using the same money to pay for all my daily prescriptions as well. Third, preserving that overly protected principle, as I call it, will result in a large amount ultimately going to my father's second cousins, who, being older than I am, already have the basics everyone takes for granted. Or that same ridiculously large amount could go to people in my adopted home overseas, people who live each month on what most attorneys earn before lunch on Monday. And my father would have hated the possibility of money he worked hard for and saved for decades going to people who have never saved a dollar for a rainy day. He's probably spinning in his grave at the very idea. But in drafting his will and trust, he didn't understand because of his cognitive deficiencies resulting from NPD. This is all deducible by language in estate documents and correspondence with me and others. Honestly, this one is hard to pin down, either because of his NPD and the traits as described by Vaknin, such as failed reality tests. My father did not understand my financially precarious future and the potentially lethal effects on my finances and health, or he did understand and cruelly and sadistically relished the idea of my future pain and suffering. My father's estate attorney never met me and thus did not know about the major implications, the major effects that my father was deliberately not telling him about, i.e., lying about. My mother, who did not have NPD, would have pointed these out immediately and would have seen to a correction immediately. But my father steadfastly refused to do his paperwork before she died, instead waiting more than 2 years after, because narcissists don't like criticism, as we regularly see in the news.